Hello, and welcome to this edition of Profession in Focus.
Cyber is a huge topical issue for everybody. And I think the one thing we have to lay down for context is the fact that cyber as a risk is a risk not only because it's an absolute risk, but because the preparedness to be ready for that risk and mitigate that risk is not as good as it needs to be compared to perhaps other kind of risk, market credit risk, etc. So there's two elements that you have to think about from the auditing profession's perspective and for the investor and the financial reporting entities that are out there.
Everybody knows that there's the challenges there, and they're very, very complicated. So I think if we just put ourselves in the shoes of a CEO or a board member of, let's say, a public company, and I'll cascade it down to small ones real quick too. What I know if I'm sitting in that role is that it is inevitable that I'm going to have some problem. Hopefully not a big one, but some problem. And I also have obligations to third parties, to customers, to shareholders, to regulators, to government laws, that I do the right things.
Anyone, whether it's an internal auditor or anyone in management or anyone, frankly, who's out there saying we are immune from cybersecurity attacks, they're wrong and they're misleading others because no one is immune. It's not a matter of if, but a matter of when.
Once you actually have a breach, trust is now broken, and the question is going to be, where are the preparers, where's the governance bodies, and yes, what are the auditors doing about that, and what kind of disclosures and transparency is there to rebuild that trust? There's obviously controls that you would hope organizations have to be in place to prevent that to the extent possible. We as auditors have to think about that from a financial reporting perspective. There's lots of other issues to be dealt with in terms of control over data that may not be financial reporting later, but may be related to consumers or purchasing or contracts or whatever the case may be. So nonetheless, the profession has an obligation to take a look at those kind of issues. I think looking forward though, there's going to be more need to provide assurance around how good organizations' controls are in place to prevent as best they can those kind of issues from happening and a catastrophic event from coming forth.
In this territory of new frontiers, there are possibilities going beyond the traditional financial audit. So looking at issues around opportunities for the profession to contribute to our thinking about cybersecurity or about sustainability auditing.
I cannot prevent a problem in this area. No one can. But what I can do is implement strategies and accountabilities to do the right thing, to implement the best practices and to implement them well. And I think there is a public expectation ultimately that is evolving that it's not just I say I do those things, but I'm able to communicate that through, I believe, assurance is going to be where it goes, to third parties that sit, so that I can say as a board member or company lead, look, I did the right things, we applied the best standards, the best thinking, and we had great people doing it internally, and we got some type of assurance that said we were doing it right. Not assurance that I don't have a problem, but assurance that I did all the right things. And I really think that that's where it's going to go.
The public is, I think, at a place where they're not as freaked out about the fact that there was a breach, but they want to know how the company is dealing with it. They want information as quickly as they can.
The auditing profession is fantastically positioned to help in that regard. We have a history of building upon and leveraging our trust platform. We have a history of understanding controls, policies, and procedures to mitigate risks. And we have the credibility to come in with the professional standards to actually provide some form of attestation in that regard. So to me, there's a big role to play in a larger context in terms of where the auditors should be and the value that they can bring that I think is pretty unique to the auditing profession.